All right, we are not live, but we're recording. As usual, if anyone has any questions, drop them in the chat. Um, I'll go ahead and pull up my chart. Um, yeah, let's share screen. Yeah, so I mean, the main thing that I'm going to be covering is like I'm going to make the case that is my base case is that we get alt season. I know this is like very contrary to like what everyone thinks right now, but I think today's price action in general, really the price action over the last 2 days is screaming alt season to me. And maybe it's just a weird day. There's just so many similarities to what we saw at the beginning of last alt season. When I say alt season, I don't mean like alts are immediately going to rip 5x in the next 24 hours. I want to be very clear about that. In fact, I think there could potentially be more downside for alts. There could be more downside for the entire market. Very aware of some very vulnerable charts right now that could totally give out. Last week, I think we talked about Pepe, and I've been posting about Pepe. Like I rarely ever short the market ever, but I've been posting in my analyst channel, that look, this is tax selling. This is we've kind of expected this decline. It's been a little bit more severe. We talked last week, I think, about the ideal scenario being the range, the 90K range lows holding. Tax selling's been brutal. We've broken through the range lows, and now we're seeing some capitulation. I'm gonna make the case for still remaining bullish on Bitcoin and remaining bullish on alts. And I think there's a lot of data that objectively pushes me in that direction. That being said, I'm in a position where, like, I've taken significant profits out of this market in January. If you're somebody who is still, somehow up a lot of money and you've not pulled money out of this market, like, not financial advice, but I highly recommend taking profits. I've been a big proponent of profit taking throughout this entire market. But I'm at the point where, with what capital I have that remains exposed to crypto, like, or, in that pool of money that I keep in crypto, like, I'm considering deploying at into stuff at these levels. And I've been kind of nibbling on some bids on a variety of different things. I think this week is very likely going to carve out a bottom. Um, Downside targets for Bitcoin are as low as 73K, 73, 74K. Really, 73.5 is like the big level that I've got, basically prior all-time high from March of last year. There's a case to be made for it, and I'm a big buyer down there. I'm a buyer at 73K Bitcoin, and I'm more so a buyer of alts. But yeah, I mean, Bitcoin just spilled. I mean, it's bouncing back, but Bitcoin at one point today was down 6 or 7%. You got Pepe up 2%. So this is a situation where if you're someone like me that's like been hedging with shorting altcoins, even like meme coins, which I do think have quite a bit of potential for downside here, it's been very difficult to. I mean, it caught a large part. I mean, thankfully hedged before this, 20% move downwards in Pepe, but I've had to close down some of those shorts and take profits, and I've even deployed, nibbled on Bitcoin, nibbled on ETH, bought some Maker, which has been performing super well. I'm not long Litecoin, regretfully. I was long Litecoin and then stopped out in profit before it kind of gave way, but now it's already kind of bouncing back. Added some HBAR because the Litecoin ETF narrative, HBAR's got an ETF filing. So I think, alts that have ETF catalysts are very attractive right now at these levels. Alts that have buyback programs like MakerDAO, very attractive. I mean, like, if you go to the Maker versus ETH chart, it's vertical. Like, so when I say like alt season, like, keep in mind versus Ethereum, Maker's up 112% over the last, since the beginning of February, over the last like 20 days. So there are select alts that are just, I think, front running what could turn into a much bigger alt season. Even to like XRP versus Bitcoin is up today. Down, XRP is down 3.6%, Bitcoin's down 3.94%. You look at I'll pull up some other charts here in just a second, but um, yeah, Pepe up 2%, while Bitcoin's down 3 to 4. Alts are saying that they don't want to go lower, and that there's some seller exhaustion, and then there's also the shorts that are having to close out. And could this just lead to a little short squeeze and then we go right back down? Sure, these things take time to play out, but um, our Bitcoin tax selling fractal is pretty much nailed it. This entire move down, like we are in the red zone since essentially inauguration, where we have both February being the second worst month of the year, in line with September. September's the worst. Now September kind of got front run a little bit. We had that big spill off at the beginning of September and then a recovery. And there was tons and tons of volatility leading up to September. But yeah, February is historically a bad month. And we also are, I've had in my other tax selling fractal, I don't know where it's at. Like I've kind of had this area highlighted with like a skull emoji, because like we are eating through all of these buyers of the ETF last year, all the way up to 73K. So tax selling ends March 13th. The bulk of it is through, and that bulk of it is what really drove us down to range lows and kind of like pushed us up down, pushed us down to this support. But this is kind of like the last leg of it, and we're at February 26th. February 26th, we were at this little candle here. So that first big push out of that consolidation, this is the push, and I know my screen's probably a little bit small, probably hard to see. This is the push where a lot of these buyers, the bulk of the price action did not challenge them. They had basically, if you bought on February 26th of last year, you've been able to hold on with only taking, 1, 2, 3 little stabs towards your entry point. And a lot of these buyers here might have even been buying, lower, right? So their average entry point might have been even lower. But the next 2 days, these buyers were much more challenged with their their entry points. And then after that, all of these buyers, very likely a vast majority of them, I still expect there to be some holders here, some tax selling, but a lot of these would have had to hold underwater for a long time to still be, holding right now. So in my opinion, like, and I could be wrong here, I think basically today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Well, no, it was Thursday last year. Today is Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. Like the rest of this week is essentially not it for tax selling, but the worst of it. And then we kind of go into this slow grind up where there was, a lot of these people got chopped out. So there is a case where maybe we do come down and tag 73K. That's fine. I'll be a big buyer down at between. I'll start scaling in at 75. Anything below 75, I'm happy to be a buyer down here. Very aggressively. Prior all-time high. This would be a very clean back test, and I would expect us to at least get some form of a bounce back up to range lows and a retest of 90, 91K. So that's the plan if we get further downside. Just stay as hedged as possible with some shorts is my plan. But like I said, I've had to take profits on a fair amount of those shorts, but they've offset a lot of downside. And it's just survival mode until we get out of this tax selling, out of February, and into the early March. Let me go to the other thing. Everyone's kind of worried about inflation because we kind of had that like high inflation print and inflation coming back. Trueflation shows inflation dropping off a cliff after February 1st, right? Remember, the CPI reports are 1 month delayed. So the February inflation report that we got, or the one that came out, was like February 14th or 15th, mid-February is when the CPI drops. That's for January. December and January, we did see elevated inflation in Trueflation, right? But we've since seen a drop off in February. February inflation has fallen down. This is like a real-time dashboard. We're sitting at 2.24. right? Which is actually pretty close to the target rate. So you're in mid-March, when that next CPI report is, I think it's March 12th, or it's mid-March. I don't have the CPI date in front of me. When that report comes out, I believe we're going to get a lower than expected CPI print, which I think could be a catalyst for, people getting bullish again. Oh, we're going to, maybe the Fed's going to cut rates. So that's my base case. Now, where I turn, like, not where I panic, but where I'm willing to consider like full on bear case is if we come down to tag 73K. I think, if we just fall through 73K, something massive is happening. That's the big problem. 73K should get a monster bid, and I want to be a part of that bid. It's similar to like the 49K level, but I'd say even stronger. And you saw the reaction we got off of 49K. So if we get a push down to 73K, I'll be a buyer down there. If we just fall through, then yeah, that's a red flag, and we've got to adjust accordingly. Or if we get a bounce and we just continue, like we fail to reclaim 91K, or fail to reclaim any structure that we print here, in the interim, right? Failure to get, to reclaim this 91K range at any point can make me turn a lot more bearish. And then if we're in March and we start trading we break below 73K, that is like, big red flag. I'll be the first to, be like, hey, this is very, very bearish. We need to be considering looking for additional shorts, in Bitcoin, because it's probably going lower. That's not my base case right now, though. I'll try to get into more why. There's a lot of reasons. One's we have lower tax selling. March, April, May is just a generally more risk on time frame for markets in general. And then I'll get into this kind of indicator that I had spun up today. Use ChatGPT to spin up like what I'm trying to visualize here. All right, so there's like, I'm gonna get rid of this RSI. There, we'll shrink that up. So down here at the bottom of the screen is kind of a weird indicator, weird looking indicator. But all it's showing is, this is saying 48%. This is at the 48 level. This is just telling us that 365 days ago, if you bought Bitcoin, you are up 48%, right? So this is just showing like there's the timing aspect of tax selling, and then there's like the actual how much profit are these people in, and what is the incentive for them to take profits when their long-term capital gains tax comes into play. Because if this drops, like if Bitcoin drops to 73K around March 10th to 13th, there's no incentive to sell your Bitcoin for the sake of I mean, you might sell it because you're bearish, but you're not going to sell it, because you've locked in long term. In fact, I'd argue you're more likely to hold it, right? So there's like the unrealized P&L or unrealized profit aspect of tax selling as well, and I wanted to visualize that. So we're seeing the 365-day profit delta between price now and 365 days ago collapse, right? It's breaking down, it's collapsing. Well, the lower this goes, the more bullish you get, and the more, ideally, the more bullish you are for, even in a bear market, a relief rally. You can see last, cycle, once this kind of collapsed down to zero, and there was no profit in the market from 365, there's essentially zero long-term capital gains tax sellers. You got this big relief rally from 32K all the way up to 48K. And that seems like a small rally. But when you're trying to hedge a portfolio or catch a bounce and catch some profit and make up for some losses, that 40 to 50% bounce in Bitcoin, and what that can do to altcoins that are very, very oversold can be a very, important time frame for making a lot of money in a short period of time, catching a bounce. And that's kind of where I get into this thought process of, okay, let's just say I'm wrong. Let's just say I'm wrong to be bullish here and think that alt season's around the corner, and that we are going higher in this cycle. Okay, this is where I can catch very likely a big relief rally, right? Because the unrealized profit and loss, the tax selling is completely gone. You know, we tagged in this hypothetical scenario 73K. Expect a big bounce, you know, a 30-40% plus bounce, probably, you know, 25% back up to 91K, maybe even a bigger bounce. And that's just kind of the thought process behind like, you know, like we're getting oversold enough and reverting to our mean enough that we do expect some sort of a relief rally in the future at minimum, right? So this is kind of useful for seeing how much, you know, how much profit, unrealized profit is there still, you know, for like tax sellers that are coming due. Now, the beautiful thing about this is like this is working in our favor too, because we were pumping so much last year. So tomorrow, you know, 365 days ago, we pumped, you know, 4%. So, you know, even if Bitcoin just sits still, we would expect this to drop another 4%, you know, from 48% to 44. And then we pumped another 11%, 12%. So over the next couple of days, this 24% difference, this should drop another, you know, assuming Bitcoin just doesn't skyrocket, which would be a welcome sight anyways, this indicator should start to compress down to levels where, you know, people who bought a year ago are only up 20-30% year over year, and their incentive for taking profits on the long-term, you know, capital gains transition is lower and lower each day. And eventually we get to like, if this thing goes to 73K and Bitcoin has reached, you know, even lower, then that makes us extremely bullish because there's no, you know, there's no profit in the market for long. There's no long-term capital gain selling from 365 days ago. So that's the thought process here, and, you know, expecting a relief soon. And when I say soon, within 2 weeks, on top of like, I think there's going to be a bullish inflation print in mid-March. Could be wrong on that, but I think there's evidence for it. As I mentioned, let's go to total 3 divided by Bitcoin. So this is excluding Ethereum, which has been kind of an outlier this cycle of just not performing super well. So if we exclude Ethereum and we look at just altcoins in general, we're seeing a couple of very interesting patterns. One is just this downtrend bleed pattern, where the downtrend was broken after the election, right? You know, this was, the bottom was like November 15th because Bitcoin pumped super hard on the election, and then altcoins kind of slingshotted off of that. Kind of peaked in early December, and then altcoins have been kind of doing this big ABC correction that culminated in this huge wick on February 5th that went and retraced everything from prior to the election. So this is just altcoin dominance excluding Ethereum. So this is how are all the altcoins outside of Ethereum performing against Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin spilled off today, and over the last 2 days, total 3 versus Bitcoin's up 7% against Bitcoin. And it's in this very interesting like slow bleed and then ABC correction with falling wedge on top of this, you know, prior bleed. I'll show you that exact same pattern and how it resolved for Maker versus Ethereum. If I zoom out, Maker versus Ethereum, and Maker's one of the top performers right now, had this huge, massive slow bleed. It popped in November, and then it did a falling wedge on top of this trend line, and then it's since broken out and exploding upwards. Now, there's no guarantee that this is going to continue, but this is just an example, one example of how this exact same pattern has broken out, where a smaller altcoin has been breaking out against its larger pair, Ethereum. So same exact pattern. That's essentially my base case. Is I just think that we're very likely towards the bottom of altcoin dominance, and Bitcoin dominance is very likely peaked. And we're going to see in some form or fashion over there. I mean, we could take another stab down. We could, you know, triple bottom here. Who knows, right? This is not a call for like the next 24 hours. This is a call for like the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even month, maybe 2 months. But I would expect early March to mid-March to give us some relief in altcoins, and I expect this to push up. That's the base case. If I throw on just like our, you know, kind of our, I think our patterns indicator here, I think it's like the weekly There's a big weekly double bottom here with a pattern target. And I don't give too much stock to these like automated patterns, but sometimes they can help you find things. Like if this double bottom completes, I mean, we're talking like a 65% pump in altcoin. We're talking about altcoin dominance moving up quite significantly, like retracing this entire move. So like there's definitely, I think, some technical analysis that supports the idea of a bottom here. And then in altcoin dominance. And if you look at how altcoin dominance, how alt season started last cycle, let's go to, yeah, we want to throw on Bitcoin, to rethrow these on. Compare Bitcoin and Solana. That's Solana, there's Bitcoin. Okay, let me throw these on logarithmic. All right, so I know this is a little bit messy, but if we look at like where did the alt season start? Like I'm not necessarily like, yeah, you could catch you can catch alt season late and still do great. And I think that's what most people will end up trying to do. Like that's where the masses will come in. But I kind of think it's pretty plus EV to be like on alt season from the potential like beginning of it, right? Because if you were bullish altcoin season from down here, and you were already rotating from Bitcoin to Solana when Solana was, what, $3? Before it ran to, wait, this is, let me make sure. Where's Solana saying 88? Oh, here we go. Yeah, Solana, let me make sure I've got this correct. Solana 370. And then it ended up running to 260. Yeah. So if you were on alt season when Solana, like the top performing asset of the cycle, was what, and again, like I'm not comparing to Solana right now. I think Solana is in a much different spot than it was last cycle. Who knows what the net, this, maybe it'll be Virtual Protocol that makes a comeback. Maybe it'll be Maker. Maybe it'll be Litecoin. Maybe it'll be HBAR, stuff that has ETFs. Maybe it'll be suit coins. That's, once we see some pockets of strength develop, if we get an alt season, like that's where we can zero in on more specific assets. I have some theories that I've shared. ETF coins and suit coins is where I'm most excited for. But Solana at $3, there's a big difference towards waiting to, like, if you waited for the breakout in alt season to get long on Solana, if you waited for total 3 Bitcoin to break out this horizontal level, congrats, you were buying Solana at $27, and then you had to buy, eat a dip all the way down to 24. It just became a lot easier to get washed out, stopped out, and it was a much harder to manage position than being up 9x already by the time everyone else starts getting long. So I want to catch alt season, if we get one, as early as possible. So the point being is, where did alt season start? Alt season started when we saw divergence between total 3 Bitcoin going up while Bitcoin was correcting. That's exactly what we saw today. Total 3 divided by Bitcoin is going up 3% against Bitcoin today, like 7, 8, 9% against Bitcoin over the last 2 days. This was in the middle of a Bitcoin correction. The first Bitcoin correction that we got in a long time. We saw a massive move out of Bitcoin after the election, topped out at 110K, give or take. And now we're seeing, this correction was last cycle was from 42 to like 29,000. So it's like a solid 30% correction. And if you were rotating out of Bitcoin during that correction into alts, you caught, the correct alts too. You were catching, massive, massive moves. So I'm not sitting here saying like, buy alts. Sure, they could have more downside, and we'll cover the downside scenario in just a second, but there's just a lot of similarities down to like the daily price action in total 3 Bitcoin, which I find super interesting. This is where alt season began. You had, Bitcoin dominance just crushing it, this big ABC correction in altcoin dominance, or total 3 divided by Bitcoin. You had this, culminated in a big liquidation, followed by a higher low and a daily bullish engulfing candle on total 3 Bitcoin. So the bullish engulfing candle is when the entire prior day's candle is undone by and then some by a bullish candle. So let me reset the chart view, go back over here. What do we have? We have this massive kind of ABC correction followed by higher low, technically two higher lows, little double bottom here, courtesy of, this week's price action. Your liquidation, and then daily bullish engulfing. Now, I'm not, the daily bullish engulfing is just like the cherry on top. It's not, you can have a daily bullish engulfing candle. That doesn't seal the deal for me in thinking that we're going to get alt season, but it's just like, oh, what a similarity, which is very interesting to me. You have a little bit of a shorter term trend line breaking out. So you have this wedge breaking out of a bigger wedge that if we can push up to, and this could take 2+ weeks. Like I said, this could take until mid-March, in my opinion, to really, we could push up here. We could, come back and retest this over here, right? We could go deeper. We could get a triple bottom. Like, it could be messy here. So I'm not calling, again, I want to reiterate, when I call for alt season, I'm not saying that I think alt season is going to develop and XRP is going to go to $4 in the next 48 hours. I just think this is a phenomenal setup for catching an alt season over the next couple of weeks. And in the grand scheme of things, if you're catching an alt season at the beginning of a move, I mean, you're just so much better positioned. I'm not saying take massive risks here and dump everything in altcoins, but I just think it's crazy to discount the idea that there's not going to be an alt season this cycle. When, of course, it always gets darkest right before it rips back up. Of course, no one's calling for an alt season down here, right? When total 3 divided by Bitcoin is tanking, right? But that ends up being the bottom. I could, of course, be wrong. I just think there's really, really solid risk reward here. We're actually at a pretty key level right now, come to think of it. This was the prior high, right? This has been kind of support jammed up above it, and now we're coming back to retest. So this is actually a pretty key level for total 3 Bitcoin to push through and get some support on, and then, ideally continue higher, right? Now keep in mind, like, this is all under the backdrop of finally getting a crypto-friendly administration and crypto-friendly SEC and crypto-friendly CFTC, Commodities Future Trading Commission. This is on the back of, and this is on the back of the traditional Bitcoin market cycle being most bullish in 2025. This is on the back of 2025, the first year of the presidency, of the presidential cycle, generally being the most bullish year for risk assets and markets in general. It's your 2022s and your second year of the presidential cycle that you want to be extraordinarily cautious for downside. Like we saw in 2022, the kind of mini recession, like we could potentially see in 2026 if we get a shorter term kind of blow off top here, or big move, big Bitcoin and crypto cycle here in 2025. It's just like a lot of data here that just, to me, really supports the idea of alt season and the market cycle not being over. We need to put on RSI because this indicator is kind of meaningless. This tax selling indicator, a little bit meaningless on this one, on the total 3 divided by Bitcoin chart. Then you look at, like, just in general, like looking at like massive weekly bullish divergence on total 3 divided by Bitcoin, altcoin dominance, like just humongous. Eventually this probably pops upwards. Like alts have been just destroyed. Now, on top of that, the bear case, like what's been really crushing altcoins has been like this meme coin extraction frenzy. I believe that is totally climaxed and popped. The meme coin bubble is popped, and that's a good thing for other altcoins and a good thing for the crypto market in general. If you look at like the pump fund statistics, and I don't have them in front of me, let me see if I can pump fund. Let me see if it pops up here. Here it is. Exactly. This is the number of coins bonded per day on Pump Fund. It's gone to 0. Like there's no one else. Like Pump Fund, I think, is being investigated. The Argentina pump fund launch is being investigated by the SEC, and pump fund has essentially gone to zero in terms of people like spewing their money on it. So like the scamming meta has just totally popped, which I think is very bullish for altcoins in general. Like not meme coins. Like you don't want all the money getting extracted out of the market through these meme coin scams. So the fact that is climaxed with the Trump meme coin, the Argentina meme coin, the Melania meme coin, the Dave Portnoy coins, like that seems to have totally disappeared from the market, which I think is just very, very good and healthy for the market. So that's just another point that I think we've supports the idea of meme season. Alt dominance, lots of or not alt dominance, Bitcoin dominance. Tons of bearish divergence on Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin dominance dropping. And again, we're looking at basically the inverted chart of that total 3 divided by Bitcoin. This is more inclusive of ETH, but failed to, just totally rejected. Bitcoin dominance totally rejected here. Bitcoin selling off, alts showing some strength in relation to Bitcoin. Right? Like if I was just going to, trade this chart like usual, I'd say this is just a failed ascending triangle, and those usually go lower. Now, could this backtest? Sure. Could this revalidate and go higher? Yeah, sure. But I think right now this is bearish. You're at a little bit of support right here, but I think overall this is bearish, and altcoin dominance is overall bullish over the next on the high time frames. You've got some individual performers. You've got charting stuff against XMR BTC. So Monero versus Bitcoin on the weekly. Now, doesn't mean that this is just going to accelerate and break out, but out of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is the 6th green weekly in a row for Monero against Bitcoin, right? Breaking out of a big downtrend level. There's still work to do here, but I mean, you have this huge weekly, if we throw in RSI, huge weekly bull div for Monero against Bitcoin, right? There's some alts, like there's some select alts that are really, really coming alive here. I've got a bunch of these, to look at. We go look at H bar against the dollar, right? Let me go actually to this H bar chart. H bar USDT. The level so far is holding that we would like. I mean, this is a technical. I mean, yes, it could go lower, but this is technically like exactly what we want to see. This is the Palantir fractal, right? You have your distribution, your cup, right? Your rounded bottom, whatever you want to call it, a reclaim of that trend line, right? This could chop around for a while, but this is so far respecting this support. This is ideally where we'd want to buy H bar and then, cut if it, goes lower. I think there's even like a little trend line here too, a little diagonal. But like ideally, like you wouldn't have wanted to sell Palantir here, right? You'd have wanted to be a Palantir buyer at like $20 or whatever that was. Right? What we want to see is a grind upward start. We want to see recovery respect of this level and continuation upwards. But if we just throw on even like the easy bands here, clean this up a little bit, go down to the, zoom into the daily time frame. We just had a massive run out of a lot of these alts. And what's happened is nothing more, like what's happened for H bars, nothing more than a mean reversion. We're sitting on the 21-week simple moving average, right? So like on a mean reversion for like some of the, what I believe to be better alts and alt opportunities in this market, like calling for the cycle to be over and calling for no alt season, that like after keep in mind, H bar just saw I get it's one of the top performing alts off of the election. It's 880% move. And then it mean reverts. And I'm hearing like no alt season canceled. Like this is a mean reversion. This is like, pretty par for the course. And actually like resets things going higher. The idea that this is just going to fall through and go all the way back down below green, like I mean, yes, it's possible. There's altcoins that have done it, and I think this is what's leading to this belief. When you see stuff, like Peanut, yeah, Peanut, which I don't even think we've got easy band data for. Let me go to Mudang, maybe. Yeah, Mudang, like we have just enough time frame here on Mudang. Like this just fell through the green easy bands. Like when you have these garbage meme coins that were manipulated and pump and dumped and like insider listed on Bybit and Binance, and then they just dump all the supply while shorting it on the way down. Like, yeah, and then they're a fad to begin with, right? You've got something like, Chill Guy, or what was the other one? I think it was Peanut, Chill Guy, Mudang, all the, yeah, like they're not respecting the green easy bands. They're not, because they're not normal coins. They're not normal altcoins. So like I think everybody's looking at, you know, the worst altcoins, like even Whiff was absolute garbage. I think overvalued for a very long period of time. Like, yes, it's possible that this is the kind of destruction that we have ahead of us in altcoins, but I just don't want to bet on that. Like, first of all, like this was free money for anyone who bid the green easy band on Whiff the first time it touched. Second time it touched, we just saw a massive unwinding of altcoins, like unprecedented levels of altcoin sell-offs, and Whiff was like one of the worst ones. So is Whiff leading in showing us what's going to happen to HBAR and Algorand and XLM and XRP? Yeah, it's a distinct possibility. I'm like, I really don't even like, I can't stand the idea of Pepe here. But thus far, the case for like not shorting it here is that it's tagged its green easy band. The last time it tagged its green easy band, let me clean this up a little bit, was the Pico low. The absolute low was the last time it tagged the green easy band. If you bought that, if you threw $10,000 into Pepe the last time it tagged its green easy band, and you got even like, you were able to hold to even remotely close to the top, you got a 30x? And that was after Pepe was pretty well established and had already pumped and kind of fallen back down. I mean, it's so far Pepe's holding. It's holding here. Now there's kind of a trend line in play here where this could get messy, and where, if this gets rejected here, maybe it chops around before recovering, or maybe tax selling, it does what Whiff does and falls down, and all this tax selling kicking in right now. And this is the reason that I'm short Pepe to begin with from up here, which is, a pretty, like, to begin with, a pretty crazy to short what is a large cap meme coin that's already down 67%. But again, just wanted to hedge this move downwards in Bitcoin, this tax selling that we're seeing in Bitcoin. But I mean, there's an argument to be made that this is just going to like chop around here, reclaim, and then we're back in business. And, I do think if we get an alt season, like stuff like Pepe, meme coins like Pepe, larger cap meme coins can survive. But I wouldn't go, and I wouldn't be touching Mudang. I wouldn't be touching Whiff. I wouldn't be touching stuff like that, which they'll probably pump to some degree too, if we get a full on alt season. You also like had a small bounce, and it took some time to chop around and double bottom and then go higher. So that could be what we see. We could see a little bit lower, some chopping around, and then price action develops over the next 2 to 4 weeks. And over here, you kind of had like this double bottom scenario, right? It's kind of what we're trying right now for Pepe. So like right now, there's stuff that's like oversold onto support, and like despite the fact that Bitcoin is capitulating today, down, went down to like 82 and change, Pepe has said no more. It's respecting very strong support, despite the fact that it's lost this trend and it is admittedly in a very vulnerable position right now. All right. Yes, I'm still short a basket of what I believe to be weaker alts. SUI, SWI. I'm short Pepe. I'm net long. Like my exposure is still net long. My goal here is to buffet the waves, so to speak, to you know, I'm not like fully neutral or stabled up or anything like that. My goal is to hedge the vast majority of the downside. If I can cut my downside on this move by 50, 60, 70, 80%, instead of just eating the entire drawdown, then that's a win. And then I've got, you know, money to, you know, proceeds from the shorts to deploy lower if I you know, so choose to. I can close my Pepe short, and which I've already closed some shorts. I'm still short Pepe, but I've closed some of it. Taken some profits. Those profits set aside, I might long Litecoin on a breakout. You know, Litecoin. Like if you didn't see the rest of the market and the only chart you were looking at is Litecoin right now, right? You ignored you ignored news, you ignored Bitcoin, you ignored everything else in the world right now, and the only chart you had to look at was Litecoin. You would look at this as a bullish ascending triangle, and that when this breaks out, you expect it to run to probably $200+. You know, of course, there's potential for wicks and downside. Of course, this could break down. Ascending triangles can break down, and then they turn bearish. But for right now, this is a very bullish pattern. Going into you know, a Litecoin ETF launch. Could a Litecoin ETF be sell the news? Certainly. But by the time the Litecoin ETF launches, we could be $200 Litecoin, and maybe it's sell the news up here. So yeah, I just think Litecoin's, in my opinion, an objectively bullish chart. And I'm glad that I've got, you know, I've shorted some alts, some weaker alts to you know, hedge this move, and now I've got capital to deploy in something that I think is, you know, potentially stronger. I've been long maker. Short Pepe, long maker, short Sui, short Floki. The other reason I shorted Bonk too. But you look at Floki, which is a meme coin that I've really never been a fan of. That looks very similar to WIF, right? This was the WIF fractal, right? So it looks very similar to WIF. And you've got all of this tax selling coming in. Now, in the grander scheme of things, this is a massive ascending triangle, right? Like, I'd even consider buying Floki if it gets this next wave down. If we could get, I really don't like this meme coin at all. But another argument for alt season is just like, this comes back down to this region. I mean, this is a massive ascending triangle that could, you know, explode into, you know, September, October, November of 2025, which is this year, right? Over the next 6 months. I just don't see anything yet to say that we're not getting an alt season. In fact, that's exactly what I would expect to be said at the lows, the absolute lows of altcoin dominance. Going back to Total 3 Bitcoin. Another one, XLM, one that I admittedly did not pick up at great price. Now, my sizing on Ripple on XRP was much higher than on XLM. This is one that admittedly, I'm still down on these positions, you know, on the XLM positions, but they've just been way smaller in size. But I'm considering buying more XLM here. We go through on the easy bands. All we've done is a mean reversion. Top performing asset off of the election, right? A big ABC correction into a mean reversion. And ideally, we see this 21-week simple moving average hold. You know, we could go lower, but even in like the traditional markets, we are seeing like just mean reversions across the board, which are like pretty normal. Tesla, which has just been brutal. I mean, pretty much just went up and tagged the top easy band, front ran it a little bit. Now it's a little under its 21-week simple moving average, probably overshooting it. My guess is 270 or so. But I would expect there to be some support held here. Look at the last mean reversion that Tesla did. The last mean reversion overshot the 21-week simple moving average, and that was the low. And then it started grinding upwards. Right? So I just I don't see enough to be calling bear market quite yet. I just don't see enough for us to be, you know, panicking here. If I see like mean reversions off of absolutely monstrous moves post election. Algorand, similar story, overshot down to the green, first wave of green easy bands, been a little bit weaker. You want to see this get back up, reclaim its 21-week simple moving average, which could take the next couple of weeks. Then you got upside. So there's a lot of, you know, a lot of charts like I think are just probably going to give good entries and very clear entries, right? Like even if you were kind of like looking at Algorand back here, like pretty clear entry was 0.13. Now I wasn't charting Algorand back here because I didn't necessarily have a reason to be super bullish on it at the time. I was bullish on XRP, and I know Algo is you know, a suit coin or whatever, and that's, you know, was one of the top performers off of the election news. But you could have been patient, waited for the 21-week simple moving average break, waited for the trend line break, and then just bought this next consolidation or bought the breakout, right? And had tons of upside. Right? So you can be patient here. You don't have to allocate towards altcoins. I'm allocating towards some, kind of pair trading a little bit because I'm hedged some of the weaker ones some of the ones that I think are a little bit weaker and have less of a narrative. But yeah, that's my, even like Celestia up 12% today against Bitcoin. Could this be shorts closing? Sure. Could this be, you know, actual positioning? Also potentially true. AVAX up 5% against Bitcoin today. I get, like, you know, 2 days ago, a lot of this stuff was capitulating against Bitcoin. And a lot of this is just, you know, shorts closing and hedges closing and whatnot. But if those shorts were bearish, they wouldn't be closing. They'd be reshorting. They'd be selling more. So I think I just see signs. I see mean reversions. I see signs of seller exhaustion. I don't see any, I see like a lot of panic in the market that I think is not necessarily warranted on the news front. Really one of the more bearish things that are happening is just this push towards, like, push into TLT, like push towards treasuries from this administration, which does suck some money out of stocks and can be potentially bearish. But it's still, I think, too soon, too early in that move to really tell. NVIDIA, top performing asset of the last 2 years, really. Mean reversion, overshot its 21-week simple moving average, reclaimed, right? Back tested on earnings today, now trading above its 21-week simple moving average. I mean, it's hard for me to look at NVIDIA and say, like, it's hard for me to build a bear case. If anything, I look at this and I think, like, you know, maybe an inverse head and shoulders, 21-week simple moving average reclaim. Looks good for a long above 140. Talked about AMD and averaging down if it hits $100. Starting to bounce a little at 105. Some bullish divergence here. Or there was, now we've kind of chopped through it. But still, I mean, I'm going to stick to the plan. I'll average down to 100 on AMD. I think this is pretty overextended to the downside. Still looks fine to me. At least for a mean reversion back to the upside, which is right now like 137, 130, 137. Even GameStop, like GameStop, mean reversion, which I know GameStop is kind of a meme stock. It's just sitting at its 21-week simple moving average. I think it's just like the time to get bearish was, you know, and no one ever gets bearish at the perfect moment, or it's hard to. It's hard to be bullish at the Pico lows and bearish at the top. But the time to get bearish on Bitcoin, in my opinion, is not now. I don't think it's now. You might have downside. You might have downside to 73K, but you're taking a lot of risk there. And I think you can just let this, if you want to sit out, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think, like, the time to get long is going to be very clearly on a reclaim of this 89 to like 91.5K range. The range reclaim is where you want to get bullish. You have the downtrend right there. And then you kind of have another little range right there. So looking at this would be March 10th that we potentially break out. This is like mid-March, like I'm talking about, going into CPI, and like we could kind of chop here and then go up into CPI. But you can be patient here and wait for like, a week or two for this to kind of settle and reclaim before you get long. The point I'm trying to make here is I do still think like this Bitcoin cycle and alt cycle is still very much in play. Nothing's happened yet for me to just take that possibility out. This is very similar to last year's price action post ETF. You had a run on the high, January 10th. We had a run on the high, January 20th. Now this did resolve much faster, but I also think we had a lot more tax selling this time around to work through. And you also had like people aping into the ETF last year. All right, you had a deviation and a reclaim, and I recall getting long on the reclaim. Right, this was a great time to be long crypto. So when this reclaims, or if it reclaims, there's no guarantee that it will, but I think it's going to reclaim. And when it does, I'm going to be looking to add to longs, cutting shorts, add to long, cutting shorts. That's the plan, at least. And one other chart I want to show you guys is Bitcoin super zoomed out. And one of the reasons that I think is a strong argument for this cycle not necessarily being over. And there's no guarantees, right? That this cycle plays out like last cycle. But and while I have the easy bands up, like throw on the easy bands, set an alert for the bottom green easy band, and if Bitcoin ever touches that, just buy. Right? There's like been every time it's ever done that, it's been the absolute bottom of the bear market. With the exception of that, like it went slightly lower on the FTX collapse. But if you bought at 18K, I think you were fine. We've yet to hit the top red easy band on Bitcoin. We've not really actually seen bubble levels. We've not seen a Bitcoin bubble or anywhere close to it. Not on the easy bands, and then also not on this indicator that I kind of spun up today, the 365-day price delta. So I'll zoom out on the monthly. Let's actually go to the weekly. Be a little cleaner. Right. Every cycle thus far, we've actually seen significant 365-day P&L delta, meaning like there's been a large P&L built up, right? We've been flat. So every single time, this was early cycle, but every single cycle thus far for Bitcoin, you've seen exactly what we've seen so far, where you kind of get this mini buildup and then a relief, flush, and then your cycle starts, right? You get this mini buildup of unrealized P&L, right? Not necessarily unrealized P&L, but 365-day delta P&L, a relief, right? And then the run. And that's all we've seen so far. We've seen a run up in 365-day P&L, grinding upwards for Bitcoin here, and a relief. And that's what we're seeing right now. So like, if I was just using this indicator alone, this is just one indicator, I would say, oh, this is the most optimal time to be very long Bitcoin. Right, very long Bitcoin. Just based off of this one single indicator. Inverse head and shoulders. Not inverse head and shoulders. Yeah, inverse head and shoulders, cup and handle, whatever you want to call it. Back test and higher is what, if I was just looking at the chart and I didn't know what it was. and I was looking at this pattern with this indicator, I'd say, oh, that looks like it's probably going higher. Whether it goes and back tests, whether the back test is over, whether we go down to 80, 81, or whether we draw this kind of flat, right? And we come all the way down to 73K, maybe something like that. The big unknown is how deep does this back test go, and have we back tested enough? But for me to like get bearish on this chart before this turns into an SFP, like a swing failure pattern, for me to like get bearish here on what is potentially just a back test and what I believe to just be a back test, just seems not smart. It just like, it doesn't seem like that should be the base case. Now, if this turns into an SFP and this fails, then yeah, I'll look to short Bitcoin at 73, because then I think it'll potentially be going lower. Maybe we get, that turns into a deviation and we can, start charting some other trend lines, and maybe we get 57. We have other levels that we come across. Whoops. Yeah, it's just like, there's nothing yet, and I'm repeating myself a lot, there's nothing yet to me that indicates that we're not going to get an alt season and that we're not going to get a higher move out of Bitcoin. I'm still bullish on Litecoin, mainly because it's getting an ETF. I think that's going to be the next narrative. That's like the safest, it feels the safest right now. It feels like the only catalysts in crypto right now are like these ETFs that are going to get passed. Where do I see XRP at 74K Bitcoin? Sure. Yeah, so the tough part is like, all right, if we get 74K Bitcoin, where does XRP go? XRP's been fairly resilient with Bitcoin. Ideally, it's, no lower than $2. But XRP, again, like, had a massive move, and we could see a deeper correction. Throw on the easy bands here. We've got our 21-week simple moving average coming in at $1.83. So remember, we've seen mean reversions in a lot of assets so far, down to their 21-week simple moving averages. I don't think it would be that crazy. And that wick low that we had was $1.80, $1.79 maybe. Right? Coming down and testing that wick, it wouldn't get me bearish. It wouldn't get me saying like, oh, I've got to panic sell my XRP. Maybe this comes back down, reclaims $2, this $2 support, and we continue on higher. Keep in mind, XRP is a very different asset in terms of like what it's capable of doing on easy band, right? Like, just because it's at our red easy band level, like, doesn't mean that it can't just absolutely jam through higher. But what did we see 2 cycles ago in 2017? We saw a huge run and then a very boring sideways mean reversion. Very boring sideways mean reversion, where it came and touched the 21-week simple moving average, bounced, tested it again, broke through down to the green easy band level, right? But if you were panic selling your XRP at 15 cents at this point in time, you missed the run to $3. You missed the run to $3.30. Right? So this was certainly a difficult hold, and you could have just been patient and waited for a clean breakout, right? And, looked to buy it at 26, 27, 28 cents on a breakout. But that's just as easy to get chopped up on some of these fake outs on the way versus holding. So yeah, ideally, and then our prior cycle high was at 196. That's been serving as really solid support. It's been serving as really solid support. So ideally, if we did go any lower, it would be like, $1.96, $2 range would hold. But then there's also this, which I'm not crazy about fractals. I know I look at a lot of them. I think they're important for kind of just seeing how price action is capable of moving. Especially after a big liquidation. But this is a fractal that I posted and have been following, and no pun intended, but XRP has been following so far. which is it's actually really crazy how closely. Like, I would not have expected it to be follow it this closely, but it's very interesting that it has. So this was the big liquidation down to $1.79 in XRP, and there we go. Big liquidation. This was the Bitcoin 49K liquidation cascade off of the what's it called? Yen carry trade is right in front of me. Yen carry trade liquidation. Right? So Bitcoin spewed down to 49K, and then it had a long road to recovery. Right? You had your, coming up to two, whatever it was on Bitcoin, but on XRP it was like 275, right? You kind of have a retest and then a rollover of that level, and then a slow bleed followed by one final kind of liquidation here. Slow bleed, one final liquidation, and then we popped up, grinded out a higher low, and then from there we just continued to grind upwards for a long period of time, right? Now I don't know if this fractal, like, I'm not sitting here and saying XRP is going to do exactly this, but I like, this is a very reasonable thing to expect to happen after one of those big large liquidations, like like we saw with XRP February 2nd, I believe it was, and August 4th for Bitcoin. So, like, honestly, if the low was in for XRP here and this just started grinding up higher and then chopping sideways, through March and April, like, it wouldn't be that out of the question for me. Like, I could see that happening. Now, I do think that this likely happens on a slightly faster time frame, just because it's XRP and we're deeper, quote unquote, deeper into a cycle than we were on Bitcoin. But maybe that doesn't matter. Time frames are tough to get correct. But yeah, like, ideally this follows the exact same fractal, and we just, that the low is in and we grind higher. I'm also open to the idea that we come down and test $2 or fill this wick or mean revert down to $1.80 and change. But for right now, like, I know, like, everyone's like kind of scared of this big head and shoulders, which is a legitimate concern, and could lead to further downside targets. But also keep in mind that this head was a large deviation that was kind of artificially created off of hype around the inauguration, and the idea that, like, a lot of this was hype around the idea that the XRP court case would get dismissed, like, on day one. It's actually kind of not surprising that it hasn't been dismissed yet, but I think it's a good thing that it hasn't been dismissed yet, because that's a bullish piece of news that's still in the chamber when they do finally announce that. Ideally, that would have gotten announced. Ideally that gets announced, like, as we're grinding upwards versus at a local top for Bitcoin. So yeah, like, I still think there could be potential, downside. At the end of the day, this is a range, right? This is, whether you want to draw it here, that's fine. It's a little bit on the low side, but this is, for all practical purposes, this is a sideways range with a deviation above. Now, could we get a deviation below? Certainly. We already have gotten a liquidation below. But now keep in mind, like, that liquidation, that's showing you where, like, demand is in the most trying of times, right? When everything's just panic capitulating, that is where demand came in. So it's reasonable to think that there's more demand down at that level, right? That is where demand has come in. Demand. Right? So until we kind of, like, break down below this range and hold as resistance, and then continue further down, like, until this happens, then I'm not willing to flip it, or, like, I'm not seeing enough other bearish signs in the market for me to be bearish on XRP without this happening. So everything so far to me just looks like mean reversions, looks like resets. Now, there's obviously certain assets that have just been demolished, but they're not assets that we should have been in, or if they have been demolished, there should have been something that we got into pretty early and took profits on. And there's been some assets that I've been a buyer of, and bidding a little bit of HBAR, Algo, Stellar, but got to manage risk. The XRP buys are a lot larger than the XLM buys at higher prices. And then like virtual, I know it's not super popular anymore, but I can't unsee that. Like, and I don't want to sit and like tell people to get super bullish on virtual, but I still have exposure. It took a lot of profits in January. Thank goodness. Should have taken more, when this was higher. But this is Axie Infinity last cycle. This is a fractal. Again, I'm not crazy about fractals. Like we don't like price can depart from a fractal at any point. They just remind me of each other, and they have for a while, really since this started selling off. And we've really followed this fractal to a T. I think virtual went a little bit deeper than this correction, but also this was like on the back of a really extractive meme coin meta. Axie Infinity, like 20x. I'm not sitting here saying that virtual is going to $20. But there's like precedent for altcoins to just get absolutely wrecked, right? Base out, make a bottom, bull div into a wedge, and then you get an alt season and a big run, and people are like, caught off guard and surprised, and then they end up FOMOing in because they finally believe that it's going higher. So you're sitting on a time where like virtual for a period of time was by far the strongest asset in the market, got rinsed, a lot of profit and loss, or a lot of profit got taken. And it's exhausting, in my opinion, and potentially running out of buyers. There's no guarantees, as I'm saying, there's really no guarantees that this doesn't, have a failed rally and then, everyone panics and capitulates lower. But I think sellers have likely exhausted, and there's a greater than zero chance, even a decent chance, 10, 20, 30% chance that this turns back into one of the stronger assets of the market. Like Nvidia, like I know like the AI narrative has been beat up recently. Nvidia just had positive earnings today. Beat earnings by like 2.7%. Up slightly after market hours. No, slightly even. It was up, wicked up, and then back to essentially even. So really, I think the name, like without kind of going on and repeating myself, I think the name of the game is surviving this tax selling, surviving these next 2 weeks, and then preserving capital so that you can pick spots. Whether it's today that you want to start averaging in, whether you've already started averaging in like me, like small nibbles on certain things, and then having capital set aside and protected to pick spots. Because I really do believe that we get some form of an alt season. CVO, if you follow his analysis, also thinks the same thing. I know Missing Mag is bullish. I'm not going to put words in his mouth and say he's bullish on like an alt season, but he's bullish on the idea of a large Bitcoin cycle, like a 300K Bitcoin cycle, which I think I'm more like calling alt season. He's more calling like mega crypto season, Bitcoin move. I'm more married to the alt season idea than like the super high Bitcoin target, but I can see both playing out. Like I can see the 300K Bitcoin target playing out. Like we're got, this is the most institutional grade adoption we've ever seen for Bitcoin. I think like the other thing is that I've been a pretty big proponent of is this market just totally bifurcating. And there's a lot of trash assets that you've gotten destroyed in if you've been in them. Like if you've been in meme coins, I've been pretty vocally bearish on meme coins for a while. You've been in meme coins or the Solana ecosystem while all this extraction and crime and scams have been going on, like, yeah, it's been bad. But if you positioned in Litecoin, like you're the very few alts that have narratives going for them, that have ETFs coming down the line, you've been okay. You've been overall okay. If you positioned in, you know, XRP after the election, if you've positioned in even Bitcoin is, you know, despite the weakness today, I think it's overall been outperforming the vast majority of alts. But I think that alt weakness is just a you know, a, a result of all of the scammy extraction that we've seen, particularly on Solana. And that we see the data that is coming to an end. Not to repeat myself, but the pump fund has gone to zero. There's no coins being minted. All right, let me get through some of these questions. Where do I see XRP at 74K Bitcoin? My best guess would be $2. $2 seems like range low, if not like 184 or 185. But I also think if Bitcoin goes to 73K, I don't think it's staying there long. I'm a big buyer at 73K. I think it's a wick to 73K, a back test, and I'll be a big buyer, and I think it snaps back. So, like, I think XRP, maybe it flushes to 185 too, where we've seen prior demand in that range. How am I saying there hasn't been an alt season? Pepe went from 100 million to 10 billion. WIF went to 4 billion. Fartcoin to 8.8. Yeah, not in the traditional sense though. Like as crazy of an alt season, or as crazy as that was, and as many of opportunities as that presented, we got a total 3 Bitcoin, like a real alt season, like a real alt season. Like the biggest move we saw this cycle was after the election. We got a 40% pump in total 3 divided by Bitcoin. We got a 40% overall pump in alts. In a real alt season, you know, December 2017 to January 2018, these are generally short-lived. The last like 60 to 120 days. 400% move overall. If we grab from the Pico low down, 440%. Last cycle, same thing, 380%. So imagine like what we just saw with Pepe, what we just saw with all these like all these meme coins. Imagine what we just saw with that, like times 10. That is like what alt season, like that is why I am so keen to and excited to try to catch the bottom of an alt season. Like, or yeah, to catch the bottom of an altcoin move, because the gains are so unlike anything you've ever experienced in your life. Even last cycle, altcoin dominance stayed elevated. We had the initial move, and then we had like NFTs and Ponzi's, you know, yield Ponzi's, and some meme coins, and you know, a lot of opportunities to make money on alts over here, or you know, as it stayed elevated. I don't know if it'll stay elevated this time, if we even get one, but the reason why I'm like sitting here like glued to this total 3 Bitcoin chart and so keen on like, it's because we're finally, after like all the damage that we've been through on Bitcoin dominance, you know, going up and altcoins underperforming Bitcoin, we finally see the signs, the light at the end of the tunnel, the signal that maybe total 3 divided by Bitcoin can pump here. We've got the breakout, the ABC correction, the liquidation, the back test on this channel, the weekly bullish divergence. The reason I'm so keen, and the reason why I was bidding even here after the position before the election, because the thesis was that Trump was going to win the election, and Dogecoin and Tesla and XRP would all pump super hard, and Bitcoin would pump super hard. The reason I was aping so hard here is because that looked like an alt season breakout that could have potentially gone higher. Now it's been retraced and back to support. We've had the liquidation, and I'm getting bullish again altcoins, because like if you get bullish on altcoins at the right period of time, it is unlike anything you've seen before in your life. Like watching, like, speaking of a coin that I'm you know, bullish on. I actually have to go to Coin Trader Pro to look at the nano chart. Like, to show you what alt season looks like, having like amazingly clean charts give you 22,000%. Nano going from like under a penny to $38. That was, that was one pump. It was like a 4,000 extra. Like, yes, we saw, like, we caught some really, really solid opportunities. And like, if you were a part of virtuals, if you caught Pepe, if you caught XRP, if you caught any of these pumps, it feels like an alt season's already happened. And that's just like a byproduct of the fact that you like outperformed the market during a very brief altcoin pump or a period of time where the market's been on hard mode. But when you get a real alt season, if you can catch the move, it's like, imagine catching another virtuals, but there's like 3 of them, right, going on in the market at the same time. That's what an alt season is like. Mara Coin Hut, MicroStrategy, have really broken down. I hate Bitcoin miners. I think they're the worst. I think they're just, I think they're terrible assets. I would never hold a Bitcoin miner. Mara, Marathon Holdings divided by Bitcoin. Man, they just like underperform Bitcoin. I just like, I can't, and I know there's altcoin charts that look like this that I'm like willing to long, but again, that's on an alt seed. Like, I just don't like, they're just running on debt. They're financing the mining of, like, the big winner are the power companies, right? Because like most of the money, most of the Bitcoin is just being direct, like any like miners are selling their Bitcoin to pay for power, pay for energy. Like, I just don't understand the thesis behind longing mining, Bitcoin mining companies. I think there's just, you get all the risk with the very little of the reward versus just buying Bitcoin directly. Especially now, like, it's even worse now with like before, like last cycle, they kind of made sense and they did, some of them ran super hard, but you didn't necessarily have MicroStrategy to the degree, to the degree of which they own Bitcoin now, and you didn't have the ETFs. So if you had a TradFi account and you wanted exposure to Bitcoin, you could kind of buy Bitcoin miners, and that's kind of why they pumped, because everyone piled in while Bitcoin was running, and like you had your TradFi money, your legacy money piling in to miners. But now that you have a Bitcoin ETF, why would anyone ever buy a miner? It just, there's no place for them in my opinion. So I just completely ignore them. Coinbase, MicroStrategy. Again, I just prefer exposure to Bitcoin or crypto versus crypto stocks. I think MicroStrategies, I think they could run to new all-time highs, but I think you're like, it's very messy. Like, MicroStrategy is a very messy, undefined, leveraged version of Bitcoin. You're buying MicroStrategy and it's trading at a premium of their Bitcoin spot holdings, and you don't have clear definitions on the risk associated with the leverage and that you're leveraging Bitcoin with. Compare that to just wanting to get leverage long Bitcoin and putting this leverage slider up to 2x, 3x, 4x if you're super bullish, 5 to short-term trading, scalping, 10x, whatever. You get very clean liquidation levels, very clean. You can put in a stop loss, which obviously you can with MicroStrategy, but MicroStrategy could do something weird, create a crazy offering, sell a ton of debt, and then all of a sudden, like, they're, Bitcoin's done nothing, but MicroStrategy's 20% cheaper, 20% lower. Like, it's just so messy that I don't enjoy. I don't want to trade MicroStrategy when I can just define the risk. Like, you're just like muddying the waters and making it even more difficult for yourself to be profitable and trade, because you're trading like you're buying Bitcoin at a you're buying MicroStrategy, trading at a premium to the Bitcoin holdings. You've got to track the Bitcoin chart. Then on top of that, you got to track the MicroStrategy chart. There's additional risk that's, brought on by MicroStrategy. I think it's like overcomplicating matters. And you can, if you're bullish Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. If you're really bullish Bitcoin, leverage up on Bitcoin, versus leveraging up on MicroStrategy or just buying MicroStrategy. I just think it's convoluted leverage versus getting the cleanly defined leverage and risk associated with just leveraging up on Bitcoin perps or options. JLP, I still own JLP, sadly, but I think downside for Solana is relatively capped around $100. I did move some JLP to Monero just because I've been a little bit more bullish on Monero. But yeah, I mean, JLP's held up better than Solana, but it's still worse. But if we do get an alt season, I do think Solana will recover to a degree, by which I can sell some JLP and move it to something that I feel more comfortable in. Hasn't been the best, but yeah, it's just been not the best performer given Solana, the heavy weightage to Solana. I have to run here very soon. Any thoughts on Curve? Fundamentally, fits into the DeFi thesis. Maker doing well. Aave had a big run. I do think if ETH finally makes a move, then Curve probably performs. But it's not at the top of my list by any means. But yeah, I mean, stablecoins are becoming a bigger and bigger narrative. Let me look at the chart. I mean, it could be interesting. Yeah, I mean, it had a big run after the election, and it's coming back down to support. Like it's more reasonable to buy Curve here than it was, up here, right? Like, I don't have any problem with, like, if you're bullish on Curve, I have no problem whatsoever with a trade that is, in fact, like, I'm not going to take this trade, but like, I think this is a super reasonable trade. I'd grab the short position by accident, long position. So, entering here, or maybe it kind of, it could take weeks to grind back down, and looking to sell at range highs at $3. Like, this is a much more reasonable trade than aping in on a downtrend, or aping in, you could have bought the breakout and you just have to have, invalidation, right? You have to chase with a stop loss or whatever. But I think this is a fine trade to take. I have no problem with this. Stop out. I mean, you're sitting at 20-to-1 risk reward. Chase with a stop loss if it starts running. Even if this is just like bounces up to these highs to 60-70 cents, I think there's upside. So yeah, I mean, like, worst case, this is just a full retracer and goes lower, and that's the bear case for basically everything right now. But like, I don't necessarily want to bet on that when we've got all this support over here. We had the huge impulsive move. We're coming back down to support. Like, I'm bullish on alts in general. Altcoin dominance going up in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, that's my take. And again, like, listen to other people. Like, I know this is like, I'm sitting here, people are probably listening to this and like, oh yeah, like maybe being convinced of like alt season coming around the corner. That's my base case, and I've presented all the evidence for my base case. I'm still managing my risk accordingly. I'm not throwing all of my money into alts right now. And neither do I think that anyone here should. I think you should manage risk accordingly. I'm just laying out my base case and the reasons for why it's my base case. There's absolutely scary charts out there that I think could capitulate much further. Like the Pepe chart looks pretty rough, and then until you throw on the easy bands and see that, hey, it is towards support. That's really it. That's all I'm trying to convey here. I'm not trying to tell anyone to ape into the market right now. It's been really rough. It's gone deeper than I had thought. I would have thought 87K Bitcoin would be the level that would hold, and we'd get a really strong bounce and reclaim already. Last January, we spent about 4 days under the range before we reclaimed it. Now, that being said, we did have cleaner, tighter price action below the range. This has been a deeper capitulation for Bitcoin, but we've only been outside of the range for almost 2 days. So if this does reclaim the range, maybe it does it in the next 2 days. Just one data point going off of last year. Yeah, we can get access to anyone who needs the easy bands that's in this group. Yeah, so I do like the easy bands a lot for like bigger bottom signals on larger assets. You do have to be careful on them on smaller assets because you can overshoot them. Or like super bearish assets. But in general, they give pretty decent bottom signals on a wide variety of assets. So XRP, especially the bottom band, that's where you're just like extremely oversold off of a panic. And that's generally where you're going to find some support. Now, for an asset like Pepe, that's kind of in between, it's a meme coin. So it's like, I think it's reasonable to take a stab here at the lower band, but it's also like what we saw with WIF just blow through them. So like no indicators 100%, but they can give you some basic guidance. Even if you're just catching a mean reversion off that bottom easy band, Maker saw a huge move, came down close to it again. You do have to be careful getting caught in a long-term downtrend though. They can give some false signals. Not false signals, like they got solid bounces and mean reversions off of these levels, but you have to be careful just not blindly holding and refusing to sell a mean reversion. All right, I gotta run here. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, and remember, this is just one person's opinion. It's not the end all be all. I just present my evidence, present my base case. Do your own research to some degree and listen to other people and always manage risk. But yeah, I could very well be wrong. I could be wrong about all of this. I've been wrong many times before in the market, but you only have to be, if you manage risk appropriately, you only have to be right with some calculated bets a few times to really make a lot of money and be net positive. That's the name of the game. So I lean towards alt season in the next couple of weeks. The big unknown is how deep does this Bitcoin go? How deep does this Bitcoin correction go? I'm a big buyer at 73K, 73 to 75. And anything deeper than that, that's where we start to question our biases. All right, guys, thanks so much. Catch you next time. Peace. I'll post the recording.